Mr. Salmi, welcome to Uzbekistan. It's a pleasure to having you on. Let me start with simple questions to break ice and to understand your personality. You are from Morocco, studied in France, worked in the USA, and now constantly living in Colombia, Bogota. What cuisine you eat at home?
Depends who is cooking. If I'm not cooking, then we eat mostly Colombian cuisine, but when I have time, when I feel relaxed, and I cook Moroccan food then.
You like cooking?
Oh, yes.
How many countries have you visited so far?
I think Uzbekistan is country number 130.
Oh, really?
Yes, but there are still about 60, 65 pending.
Great. And how many governments have you advised on improving higher education system?
I think I've worked on higher education in 101 countries, counting Uzbekistan. Sometimes I advise governments, sometimes I advise universities directly.
Okay. Thank you for introduction. And let me proceed to the main part. And can you please outline main trends in global higher education system these days and in the nearest future?
Well, what we've seen for the past few years is what we could call factors of disruption. Big changes from which we cannot recover. Things will be different. We cannot go back. The first one I would say is globalization. Mm-hmm. And in the case of higher education, it's not only internationalization, many more students studying abroad, many more exchanges among universities, students going for a semester abroad or coming to your university from another country, professors, participation in international conferences, and then the rankings, which we like when they say good things about our university and which we hate when they don't recognize that our university is much better than what they say. So back in 2003, 3 young people at Shanghai Jiaotong University published the first academic ranking of world universities. And we have not recovered from that because for the first time we have an objective measure of how universities compare with universities in other countries.
So the race has started.
So the race, maybe it started before, but now it's even more acute. And we get leaders of, not only university leaders worried about that, but also the authorities, national authorities, ministers, and sometimes even president of countries as being happy about the results of the country or not so happy, and then wanting their universities to get their act together. So that's the first trend, globalization. Second trend, the economy is changing. We're talking about Industrial Revolution 4.0, Education 4.0, and certainly labor market 4.0. With automatization, with robots, with artificial intelligence, everything is changing. Many things are changing. Jobs are disappearing, new jobs are coming up. If you think about your computer or your smartphone, we didn't use the word apps. All of a sudden we talk only about apps. We talk about the iGene, the iPhone generation. So it's changing. The world of work is changing. Even the jobs that are still staying will be transformed, will become more automatic. We will be using the internet, the computers. And then linked to that is the influence of technologies. So technologies are changing not only our jobs, but the way we learn. We can learn online. We can learn using our smartphone, access information. So that's changing in a big way. So I think these are 3 big factors of disruption that universities cannot ignore.
Talking about technologies, despite the rise of internet, the importance of brick and mortar universities has only increased. What do you think? What drives offline education and universities to become successful these days?
Well, you are saying that they are more important, and they are saying that, and they would like to believe that it is true, but I think it's a challenge. If you don't transform yourself, I think in the US today about 40% of students who are enrolled in brick and mortar university take classes online at the same time. So I think, I mean, you're right in a way, alluding to the fact that those who have predicted the disappearance of brick and mortar universities have been proven wrong. Many brick and mortar universities are alive and kicking, as they say. They are doing fine, but they have to transform themselves. They have to evolve, and we have, I think, in what we will see increasingly are hybrid universities combining the regular on-campus teaching and learning, but also a lot of online learning.
Regarding the race, traditionally universities of the US and UK were on the top of the rankings, but do you see any new players who are joining this race?
Well, definitely the Chinese are improving fast, and that's not because the ranking is done in Shanghai. The ranking uses objective and transparent indicators, so they are not playing with the numbers. When the first Shanghai ranking was published, 2003, and then in 2004, I think we had only 18 universities in the top 500. Now we have close to 60. And for the first time last year, we had one Chinese university in the top 100. This year we have 2. But it's not only Chinese. We have also one from Singapore. And if you look at what's happening in East Asia, that's where a lot of progress is taking place very fast. One good example is Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, a young university 25 years ago that didn't exist. Today they are, if not the number one in Asia, certainly in the top 5.
Talking about Asia and ranking, the last QS ranking for 2018 showed that in top 10 there are only Korean, Singaporean, Hong Kong, and Chinese universities, and there is no Japan. What happened to Japan? Why it's losing its positions, and what factors are affecting the growth in the countries that I mentioned that are doing well?
So as we know, the rankings, when you say you are top in the top 500, 500 is a fixed number. Whatever movements happen, you have only 500 in the top. So if you have new countries, new universities getting into the ranking, it means that some of them that were in the rankings will be kicked out or will abandon or will fall out the ranking. And indeed, Japan is one of the big losers if we compare between 2003 and today. I think the challenge in Japan has to do with internationalization. I mean, don't mistake me, you still have extraordinary good universities. University of Tokyo is a world leader. But because Japanese, compared to the rest of the world and the rest of Asia certainly, are not so keen on learning English, I think that's a big challenge because it makes it more difficult to attract top foreign researchers, to attract good foreign students, to have exchanges, so top foreign Japanese professors going to other universities, students, and to do joint research, which will lead to joint publications. So that's one of the challenges of Japan. And then because the economy has suffered, the government has not been able to increase resources or even to maintain for research and for the top universities. So these are some factors that are affecting Japan negatively. And at the same time, the other countries experience the opposite. So China has been investing like crazy in its universities, same thing in Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan. They are really putting lots of resources. National University of Singapore is very international. I think half of its professors are foreigners and 75% of its researchers are foreigners.
Mm-hmm. So you think the concentration of talents and the concentration of resources are the main features, the main factors?
Well, they are very important, but there is a third factor that is equally important, perhaps even more important, I believe. It's governance. Good governance, having flexibility so you can transform yourself, you can change, you can invest in areas that are more promising. So for me, the governance factor is also equally important.
Mm-hmm. I see. Traditionally, in Soviet times, higher education was strictly regulated by the government. But now many countries are reforming their higher education system. And can you share some success stories from post-Soviet countries?
Well, the Soviet Union has suffered badly from the transition, at least in terms of higher education. If you notice, there is only one Russian university in the top 100, that's Moscow State University. And we haven't seen progress over the past 5 years yet in terms of the ranking. At least, I think there is progress because the government has had this 5-100 initiative. But when we look back at what happened back in the early 90s, in the transition, the Russian universities have been hit hard by financial crisis, so they had less resources. Second, they have suffered from some of the same problems as Japan. Lack of internationalization and being inward-looking, lack of collaboration with foreign universities, and issues of governance, perhaps universities not being as agile as you would find in some European countries or even Asian countries or North America. Now there are exceptions, there are very interesting initiatives. For example, Moscow School of Economics, which is a young university, about 20 years old, and they've been doing very well with partnerships with many foreign universities, with London School of Economics as an example, and as a result they have developed new programs, have been quite dynamic and have been able to attract many young students.
What about Central Asian countries? Are there any good examples of how government is reforming higher education system?
Well, one interesting comparison that I've made in looking at two countries where I've worked extensively, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, for example, I can see the contrast. In both cases, you have rich countries with lots of oil and gas money, but my sense is that Kazakhstan has gone much further and faster in transforming its higher education system, and they've done it in two ways. One is to give additional resources to reform the governance, to give more autonomy to the public universities. Actually, three ways of doing it. The second way is to allow the private sector to expand, and they have quite some good private institutions. We know, for example, the British Kazakh University in Almaty or KIMEP. And the third way has been to establish from scratch a new university, Nazarbayev University in Astana. And it's astonishing to see the rapid progress of this university that I think they graduated their first cohort of new graduates about 2 years ago. And it's a very international university. They are building up their research capacity. So they show that it can be done. And hopefully we will see the same happening here in Uzbekistan.
Comparing Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, what are the specifics of reforming higher education in these countries?
So if I look at both countries, I've already talked about what Kazakhstan has done. The case of Azerbaijan, the higher education sector really hasn't developed as fast and as extensively. And I think this is due to the lack of long-term vision of the importance of higher education for development. I was very struck when I read that when the new prime minister, who is a lady in Norway, took over, the government, in one of her first speeches, she astonished her fellow citizens by telling them, we need to forget about oil and gas, which are the basis on which Norway has become very rich. In fact, I think they have the largest sovereign fund in the world. And she told them, in the future, it's knowledge that will be the gas of the future, the oil of the future, the engine of development. And I think that's a very powerful statement, reminding countries that have natural resources that they should know that natural resources will finish at one point. They are not eternal, and it's important to diversify the economy to have more added value and to rely more on knowledge, product knowledge, services. And you cannot do that without having well-qualified people, without building up your human resources and your research and making sure that it's relevant to the needs and the development characteristics of your country. So this is, I think that's where we need to think when we think about the future of countries, is how to build up this knowledge economy and to build the connection between universities and the economy, and also within the university sector, making sure that your research institutes and the universities work together or even more integrated. That's another challenges for post-Soviet economies, where you have a very strict separation between academies of science and universities. And perhaps to finish with a quote from the founder of Alibaba, this huge online company from China, Jack Ma, who said recently that the wealth of the future will be based not only on competition of knowledge, but perhaps more importantly, competition of imagination, competition of creativity, and competition of independent thinking.
Mr. Salmi, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.